another. So when I studied about monuments, monuments are one of observable cultural artifacts. So in Ethiopia has a long history of civilization in terms of architecture, art, starting from heyday of Aksumite period. So the function of those monuments are one gathering, they are acting. Hello?
Can you share your screen, your presentation?
Okay. What about now? Is it visible?
Yeah. Yeah.
Put it in a presentation mode.
Okay. Here it is. Is it visible, Professor Godfrey?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's very fine.
Yeah, so the function, monuments are function as a gathering place to strengthen the society's cohesion. So this study aims to describe the values of monument and their cultural aspect in 3 consecutive regions in Ethiopia. So the history of constructing different sizes of monument in modern Ethiopia started during reign of Menelik. Series of studies have been conducted on representation of monument from political aspect, but the aim of this study is to explore cultural aspects, not solely on political aspects. The main objective of this study, as I've said, describe monument from monument, cultural depiction of monument in Ethiopia, examine the values of monument constructed in those 3 consecutive regions in Ethiopia. Lastly, examine iconic monument cultural dimension constructed in Ethiopia. So I'm a little bit rushed. So to say on values of monument have several reasons. The first value is religious value. Monument serving the religious function in 2 ways. First, they are used as a symbol that represent the religion. On the other hand, the believer use monument as a votive offering to their god or goddess. The second is the economic value. In developing country, I think this study is a little bit outdated, 2030, but developing country account for over 45% of world tourism arrival and more than 35% international tourism receipt. One of the tourism artifacts is monument. The third is aesthetic value, and beside monuments are also used for political value. Here is my point, the cultural value of monument. Monument as part of cultural heritage, they create sense of unity and belongingness among people who share similar background. In fact, culture is an amalgamation of social, economic, and the political feature. Thus, it could be reflected in political context. Thus, it is worth to overview the constructed monument in 3 consecutive regions from Hofstadter cultural dimension. So, Hofstadter identified and validated 6 cultural dimensions. Those are power, distance, sex, differentiation or masculinity and femininity, long or short-term orientation, individualism, uncertainty, avoidance, and indulgence. Those dimensions are a framework for my study. So I'm going to analyze the cultural value from Hofstadter cultural dimension models. So to begin with, imperial monarchy era, monuments are constructed in this period predominantly. They are a Lion of Judah and an industrial type of monuments. So those monuments are reflecting first power distance. There are tendencies of honoring and legitimizing the emperor power in political landscape. Second, sexual differentiation, masculinity or femininity. The constructed monument in monarchical era were representing the masculine role, which is dominant value within political and working organization in the society. The second is monument which are constructed in their region, military junta. So from Hofstadter cultural dimension, monument constructed in this era epitomizes the high power distance, which is characterized by ideologies of power polarization and the elite theory about society. Their ideology of Marxism and the Leninism, which is related with socialism political ideology, was a fashion during military junta or Derg regime in Ethiopia. Therefore, monuments like Karl Marx, Lenin were constructed. The other is collectivism. They epitomizes collectivist culture, which is characterized by strong cohesion among groups or individuals of the society. The last monument constructed in incumbent government in the current regime.
You have 3 minutes.
They have been reflecting mainly, but not limited to, collectivism in terms of region, less power distance, and less masculinity. So on conclusion, so monuments are the site of epitomizing cultural, religious, aesthetic, economic, and political values. Besides, in Ethiopia, they are highly inclined with political values and cultural values. So the cultural values of monument are overlooked in Ethiopia. They are highly used for political purpose. So they are not boldly represent unique culture of our nation and nationalities. Monument constructed in the current government somewhat reflect the cultural aspect of ethnic group found in Ethiopia, but still their values are downgraded. Thank you very much, Professor Godfrey. I've finished my presentation.
Thanks very much, Professor. Thanks a lot, and you've really kept time. Mr. Michael Ntende will be our host, so he will be reminding us of the time. So we thank you for that very good presentation, and let's go straight to the next. The attendees, you will have your questions jotted, and you will have 10 minutes to ask. So the next one is Mr. Okeny Charles. Okeny Charles, research fellow, can you please take the floor?
Chair, how many minutes have you allocated each?
Each one 10 minutes.
Okay,
10 minutes because we have 1 hour.
Okay.
So each one is 10 minutes. Then the attendees will have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Prof.
You can
Michael,
raise the white paper.
Michael, can you allow me share the screen? It's not accepting. Michael?
Daba, can you stop sharing, Prof?
Okay, I'm trying, but I think there is a poor connection here.
Yes.
Okay. I share my screen. Yes, I welcome everybody to my presentation on the pre-colonial stonewall structures of Palabek. It's a new discovery actually that came through during my PhD study. Going straight, we find that scholarly debates on stonewall and earth-mound structures in Africa has always gained a debate over time, especially on the origin that denies any African development as far as architectural technology is concerned. The origin has always been given to the outside world, that is the Western world. So of recent, you will find that this debate is coming up, and yet research is still limited to specific monumental structures, which were allegedly discovered during the colonial days. For example, we find that Great Zimbabwe is always talked about as if it is the only monumental structures in Africa. Yes, it is the best preserved monuments and the biggest almost in Africa, but there are also so many other structures, especially in the southern part of Africa, that are not talked about. So when we come to East Africa, archaeological researchers always also focused on monumental landscapes. However, the challenge is that the qualification of sites as monumental landscapes has been shaped by Western paradigms that focuses on size and scale. So how big the monument is, or how extensive the monument is, it is always considered as monument by scholars. And yet, internally in Africa, we put focus on meanings and values. As put forward by Bruchach, 2014, that although indigenous people have long been used as informants in documenting sites, Western scientists have exerted control over indigenous property. And as a result, indigenous knowledge and concerns have been pushed to the margin. So when we come back to our country here, Uganda, the pioneering archaeological researchers who came in the early 1920s used the same parameters of size and scales to determine potential archaeological sites across the country. And much as the number of sites as such as the Bigo, which are earth mounds in Western Uganda, were documented, and the research in most cases did not reflect the views of those who owned and used the sites. And secondly, most of the rich sites across the country were not given attention, yet they are valued by the indigenous community. And always the recommendation of what to be included in European narration about African architecture never considered the following, that is the views of indigenous people on monumentality. And whereas Western scholars considered monumentality in terms of size and scale, indigenous people's views go beyond actually to consider the values and meanings attached to the monument. As put forward by Davis, 2013, he argues that equating European architecture with African architecture obscures the ways in which status and power were enacted and all projected in Africa, and the ways in which individuals or events were commemorated, incorporated into community memory, and involved in the construction of indigenous landscape. And when we look at northern Uganda, for example, initially it was seen as archaeologically unviable, and hence the Western scholars recommended for ethnographic and ethnohistorical studies, because the region was seen as dry and unpopulated, but also it was seen as far from the colonial center of authority in central Uganda. However, even when the ethnographic and ethnohistorical scholars came across substantial monuments of African origin in northern Uganda, for example, they were selective in reporting, especially the stone walls that I'm presenting on. They were never reported anywhere in the history books. You can search Webster's, you can search Atkinson, you can search Garding, you can search almost all other history books that were written about Atole, northern Uganda. You will never find anywhere mentioned as the stone wall structures existing there. Therefore, in deconstructing the colonial tendencies, this current study is based on decolonization theory or approaches in which archaeology is used as a means to counter dominance of colonial ideologies in order to improve the accuracy of indigenous presentation. And this is by providing evidence that, see, much as you did not record these things, you were interested in the narratives about migration of people from South Sudan into Uganda. What about these structures that were built then? So we, in the decolonization theory, we use archaeology backed by the presentation of the indigenous communities to present evidence that shows the past architectural culture. And the study used oral interviews and archaeological study, archaeological survey to document the stone wall structures in Palabek counties of Lamour district. If you see in my map, Lamour is way up there in northern Uganda, bordering South Sudan. And also the thick lines here shows Palabek. Palabek originally used to be one sub-county, but now it is divided into Palabek Kal, Palabek Fogil, and Palabek Game. So it's now 3 in 1 sub-county. And the methods, materials and methods that we used is archival records, searching through the extant data that exists in the different archival records of Uganda, then using key informant interviews. As you can see, we're talking to one of the chiefs in Palabek Ogili. And then thereafter, these key informants interview led us to archaeological survey, where we
Yes, you are left with 3 minutes.
Okay. We did archaeological survey. Now, the fieldwork results gave us a number of sites that dry stone wall structures, copules, stone cairns, game boards. These were found associated with rock hills and archaeological artifacts. And for this particular paper, the focus is on stone wall structures as detailed below. So the stone wall structures are in the 3 sites: Pamwa stone wall site, Rom West stone wall site, Katungulu Pawudating, and the Gega Hill stone wall site. If you look at the first picture, is showing you the Pamwa stone wall site, but because of time, I may not reconstruct you the entire thing. It starts from the lower side, this end, then this is the middle part. And when you move further, you get now to Orom West stone wall site, which is having extensive walls on top of the hill. These walls are built on top of the mountain. There's a flat surface there, which was used as a settlement area. And as you can see down here, all these are potteries. Then we have grinding stones all appearing there. The third one is the Katungulu Pawudating. It is a bit crumbling because of environmental factors, but they used to be well-constructed walls. And this one is the Gega stone wall site. Key features include logically arranged stones of all shapes and sizes, which had a minimum effort made to reshape the stones from the original breakage. And the big, medium, and small size stones were used interchangeably. The walls range in height from 1 meter to 1.9 meter, and the average thickness range from 0.8 meters to 1 meter. For Orom West, three visible gates are seen, especially this one, as you see. It is these gates are quite small, with a width ranging to 0.5 meter and the height of 0.5 meter as well, with a diameter. The diameter, it is a large site of up to 48 meters. And now the question is, who built the stone walls? We find that the communities tell us that originally the Paduat people, who are one of the Acholi clans in Palabek, settled there, but they later abandoned it for present area, which is in Paduat Northwest, currently in Palabekogili. It is not clear why they abandoned, but the search for game hunting and agricultural land was suggested. Unfortunately, there is no written history information about these factors, and it makes it currently difficult to trace the origin. And the function, we find that the Gega and Katungulu for auditing site was used as a communal fence, while Pamwa and Palabek shows a political authority with 3 sections, and section 1 where a lower class lived and where agriculture and hunting took place. Section 2 is the middle part where subordinates or I think defensive soldiers lived, and section 3 is where the royal family could have lived. Significance of these sites, they helped to transform the image of northern Uganda, which has always been known as conflict landscape, into a landscape of ancient architectural technology. And the reconstruction of relationship of northern Uganda with other parts of the world, and should also can be transformed into source of revenue to local people of Palabek, jobs to the managers and guides, and training ground for heritage students through field schools. The final part is that the strategies, we have to develop strategies for harnessing these benefits, and this can be done through working with the government, through Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, Uganda Museum, Uganda Tourism Board, sensitizing the indigenous community on the values of conserving the site, and sensitizing local leaders on the values, as well as conducting further archaeological research, because we believe there are still a number of sites which have not yet been documented. I conclude that irrespective of size and scale of stone walls, they had meanings and values to the indigenous people. And therefore, when talking about this landscape, we should let the Palabek teach us about the people of Palabek, as well as Great Zimbabwe about the people of Zimbabwe and its connection with other African countries. Timli Chweinga in Kisumu about the people of the area, instead of lumping them. And therefore, interpretation should reflect such views because they are all important. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you very, very much. That was a very, very exhilarating presentation, Charles. And then let's go straight to Robert. Robert?
Yes, Prof.
Yes, Robert Semlende will be presenting on characterizing the Sangwan Stone Age techno complex at Sango Bay.
Charles, you can stop sharing.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Just a moment. Yeah. Okay.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you, the chair. Allow me to share my screen. Okay. Good afternoon, members. Once again, I'm going to take you through my presentation, which is characterizing the Sangwan Stone Age Techno Complex at Sango Bay, Southern Uganda. This is part of my major or my bigger project, which is my bigger project for a PhD I'm on right now, which is situating the Sangwan Techno Complex into Stone Age context at Sango Bay, Southern Uganda. There we are trying to look at the workshop because we are basically going to look at materials that were manufactured in different areas. My presentation will base on the following. We shall look at the Stone Age nomenclature of Sub-Saharan Africa. We shall look at the controversies surrounding the Stone Age nomenclature. We shall look at the problem of this big study. We have the site location, research methodology, as well as the findings, the background of my study. Stone Age cultures are by far the longest lasted stone human culture activities that started far in the remote past up to the present. When it came to Africa, more especially in sub-Saharan Africa, Stone Age is divided into three that form the age system, that is Early Stone Age, Middle Stone Age, and later Stone Age. Whereas when you move to the Western world, they have modes which are 5. What I've been talking about to characterize them, basically they use the tool types, which we refer to as the typology. We can see where we begin from, where we have ESA, we have very crude chopper that was used by people of the early Stone Age. But in between there is a transition in knowledge and the brain capacity changing. We see in the middle area where I have the MSA, a new level of technology changes where the so-called chopper that had even the cortex changes slightly or greatly to form a knife or a spear, but it's hafted. The best example can be related to a knife we have today, which is seen just below the hafted stone. Then when we move on to the later Stone Age, which is the third stage in the Stone Age nomenclature as far as sub-Saharan Africa is concerned, we have a braid or a point that comes on board that shows modification and change in technology as well as change in the level of the brain capacity of the tool makers. But where is our study located? Our study is located in an area that when archaeologists who are working in the Stone Age nomenclature of the three, that is Early Stone Age, Middle Stone Age, and Later Stone Age, was borrowed from South Africa. But researchers working in East Africa came across tools that could not fit in the triplicate, and they formed what we refer to as the intermediate industries. Some where we have the first intermediate between the Early Stone Age and the Middle Stone Age, and then the second intermediate after. Our area of study is basically in the first intermediate, where we see the Sangoan culture coming on board with such kind of tools which are bulky. The biggest problem are the debates that surround the Sangoan. These are basically in three great areas. One is by definition, what is really the Sangoan? Wayland says the emphasis of the monastery, the La monasteries of UK. Clark says the Sangoan is a transition from Early Stone Age to Middle Stone Age. Others, like Macabriti, Bushozi, and Boa, for them they say it's an independent industry. On the other side, we have the typology. What is the toolkit? We can see different scholars with different toolkits as far as the Sangoan is concerned. But what exactly do we find at the type site? We move on to look at a new area, another controversy which is great, that is the environment. What some scholars like Macabriti say it's an open, a grassland environment variant, whereas other scholars say it's a woodland environment. So in that very way of life, this study had these objectives 3, such that we can explore and find out what exactly is the Sangoan at Sango Bay. Number 1 was to examine the typology. We wanted to look at number 2, the technology of the Sangoan culture, as well as number 3, investigating the environment in which this study was, the hominids who made these tools stay. To get these answers, I looked at this study through the lenses of the system theory by von Rode of 1940s, which was brought to archaeology in the 1960s, stating that knowledge can be understood by studying the whole but not parts. In this capacity, we have people who made this, those are the hominids. We have the environment in which they existed, that is the society or the field. And then the interaction of the people and the environment determine the kind of culture which we are supposed to use. So based on this, that we have the element of the environment and the people, this study was backed up by the environmental determinism theory as another study. My research design. This study was basically talk about multidisciplinary kind of research, which is both qualitative and quantitative, where we collected primary and secondary data, but all the above were supplemented by ethnographic inquiries. The study area. My study area is Sango Bay, which is located at the extreme south, if you can see the grey corner, where we have Chotela, Lakai, and Masaka close to Lake Victoria. And the black spots, those are the key areas or the key sites where we have Sekaningo, we have Simba, we have Musamba Twin Island, and we have Katela Hill that were greatly covered and excavations were done in those areas.
Robert, you are left with 3 minutes.
In the same area, we can see the surveys or the methodology taking place from the survey, which is systematic up. We are in position to identify materials which are embedded underground or which are in situ. In the lower peak, you could see that we have a discoid, and based on that, we use the law of superimposition and assumption that materials in the lower layer are older than materials in the upper layer. So based on the fact that we had to excavate as another method, and from the excavation, we are in position to see the materials or to get the materials you see following. What did we get from the field? In the field, survey yielded a number of materials which are good for my study. Basically, we have ceramics, we have the board games, and above all, lithics. Well knowing that the Sangoan is a lithic industry knot, which is dated between 400,000 years to 200,000 years. Whereas ceramics is only in the Holocene of the last 10,000 years, so more emphasis was put on lithics. We ended up producing or going for excavation in the 4 sites I've mentioned. We scooped a total of 3,433 lithic artifacts plus the 518 which we got from survey. We got a total of 3,951 artifacts, which this study worked on greatly. In this kind of study, or if I can look back slightly, in excavation, the categories we got to get the typology, we'll group them into different broad categories, where we got cores, the debitages, the non-fract, and the retouched. But each of these has greater tools which fall it in the specific categories. Then from there, from the definitions we've had, the Sangoan is looked at as a heavy-duty industry. But the study became too good that we came across materials which are of light industry. From the bottom, you can see we have the precorious, we can see we have crescents, we have the burins, we have scrapers, we have triangles, and now what it could be that other scholars who have looked at this study previously completely ignored the element of light duty materials. Still in the same study, we created soil samples, and these soil samples, some were taken to Mbarara University of Science and Technology to diagnose the phytolith. We can get those plant skeletons to know in which environment really the Sangoan is, and others were taken to the University of Illinois in the US for OSL dating. I'm happy to report that tentative dates coming from the lab in the US are giving us a date of which is quite spectacular, in line with our survey or with the study of the Sangoan in different areas of Africa and globally. Sekaningo has an age of about, tentatively, the age of 1940,000 years, plus or minus 0.9. Whereas Simba is giving great dates of 32,000 years plus or minus 3. So when you look at these dates, if all goes well with the dates of Simba, this will be a great contribution that this date might be the oldest, representing the exact name we call Sangoan, which is named after Sango Bay, and works of Wayland to name Sangoan culture from Sango Bay were not fruitless, but really he did a great work. If this date comes up, the Sangoan might be originating from Sango Bay. Thanks very much. That's my presentation.
Thanks very, very much, Robert. That was great presentation. Without wasting much time, let's go to Goretti. Goret has come. Has Madame Goret come? And how about the next presenters, Joyce, Nansamba, and Baluku?
Baluku is around.
Oh, yes, 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 Martin. Martin, you are most welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, that's Joyce in the background. Okay. Now, since Goret is not yet here, we can reschedule.
This is Joyce.
Oh, that's Joyce. Yes, since Goret is not yet here, we can hear Joyce and Martin presenting on humanitizing psychology in Uganda. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, moderator. This is Joyce Nansamba and Martin Baluku, and this is a work in progress. So we are going to provide so far what we have done in humanitizing psychology in Uganda beyond humanistic psychology. And we had an interview with Professor Julius Fred Chikoma. We shall begin with a few key terms which are going to be very necessary for this presentation. And the first one is the social-cultural turn, which is a realization that happened at the end of the 20th century, that the social, the cultural, and relational side of psychological science had been neglected to the extent that psychology was beginning to suffer detachment from the historical, the cultural, and political contexts of human life. So that is the social-cultural turn. Then we have the humanistic psychology, which is a perspective in psychology that believes that psychological phenomena, studying psychological phenomena is about someone's personal agency and free will, and that is the motivator for all behavior and not any other factor such as the culture and etc. Then we have indigenous knowledge. These are philosophies, understanding, long histories and experience of interaction with their natural research. This is research predominantly performed in Africa, by Africans and for Africans. So what motivated us into this interview was the renewed interest that is happening currently in advancing indigenous knowledge in African scientific research practice. And also the realization that the role of historical and culturally established forms of social interaction and coordinated conduct in social research and theory development. Then we are also at a time when there is critical psychology perspectives because they eschew the context, and yet the context is now part and parcel of the key critical aspects that are being considered by researchers. And then the social cultural turn, which I've mentioned earlier, which occurred at the beginning of the at the end of the 20th century, and also at the beginning of the 21st century. So then, with that kind of motivation, the critical thoughts on what it is and how to proceed by a thought leader in psychology at Makerere was worth tapping into. And that's why we went to interview Professor Julius Chikoma, who actually has vast experience and research in the areas we are trying to interrogate. So the professor's current psychological research area deliberately focuses on the social cultural, historical perspectives, and Afrocentrism. So the professor is actually, his thinking and research resonates with the aspects that motivated us to conduct this kind of interview. And his current research practice is currently hinged on a book project that he birthed at because of the under phase 1, administrative psychology. He got lessons there. Then academically in his own PhD, because he also had a supervisor of PhD students. So we are going to see that in each of these learning experiences, there are particular aspects that actually instigated him to go into the kind of the area of research that resonates with the current move on the continent, that is looking at African scientific research, that is looking at sociocultural perspectives, and that is looking at the issue of context as key in scientific research. For instance, in his administrative experiences, the professor found out as the dean of the School of Psychology that scholarly output of many of the researchers in the school was mainly journal articles published on the dictates of the journal outlets, which he says is an important development in the school, but he says it deprives researchers on the realities on ground, okay, because it is based on the dictates of the journal outlets and not necessarily addressing the challenges of the realities that are faced by the students who are studying different aspects of psychology. And also available literature is predominantly influenced by mainstream literature, carrying mistaken assumptions about issues that psychologists grapple with in trying to practice psychology in our context. He also discovered that these literatures are based on the assumption that a uniform and structured way of life exists, and therefore it creates conditions that psychologists use to explain behavior and so forth. So there is currently half the story in terms of appreciating the nature of the human being that psychologists study. So that was the experience administratively in looking at our school in general. The professor also on his PhD journey, he also discovered some experiences and also in supervising PhD students currently. Now, in supervising PhD students, the professor and the students discovered that there are limitations in the literature for students to make reference to the context in which the research being conducted is found. There was scarcity of local-based literature done by people familiar with the context or who live the realities of the context. And also most knowledge produced that is around psychology was in the mainstream perspectives, such as the humanistic perspectives, and based on forms of life that were more Eurocentric, not centering the African at the gate of theorizing. Then, and the mainstream modes of thinking that are dominating much of the literature in psychology have assumptions about the human being, but they come with a certain set of beliefs, cultural context, history, and time that are from a Eurocentric perspective, but which are extrapolated to become a universal assumption about humanity. And this was looked at as a gap. And also attention, the professor with the students felt that there's need to pay attention to a key ontological issue, because this is psychology, of what it means to be a human being. And so they decided to deliberately look at the question of subjectivity in studying psychology. Then they need to engage scholarship that gives agency to the research, that is giving the power of authoring the story to the one telling it. The professor also had experiences as a student of PhD. I'll not give all of them, but some of them. He studied entrepreneurship behavior in Uganda. And in that study, he discovered the need to question the very assumptions that the prevailing assumptions about entrepreneurial behavior were based. He found out that entrepreneurship behavior was all still mainly influenced by mainstream perspectives that provided a repertoire of traits for success uncritical of context. So the issue of context not being considered by a mainstream perspective, the issue of mainstream perspectives dominating literature in psychological research has kept part of the learning aspects that the professor decided to tackle and so forth. So then what happened? There was a turn in which the professor and his PhD students decided to face and work on some of these identified experiences that I've said before. And one of them was the urgent need to prioritize sociocultural perspectives and indigenous knowledge away from the mainstream perspectives that were not really looking at sociocultural perspectives in psychology. So the professor and the students made a deliberate effort to look for and situate research, studies, and theoretical references in psychology in an African perspective. They decided that they should place the African as the central point for theorizing psychological phenomena, and therefore join forerunners in such thinking like Bamen Saminang of Cameroon in promoting indigenous African scientific knowledge and furthering theory in an Afrocentric standpoint, and also underscoring the issue of context in psychological research because the mainstream perspectives, as I've mentioned them, gloss over elements in a sociocultural perspective. So why now? Why is this coming now?
Joy,
because
conclude.
This is because of the ongoing debates on the African continent. There are debates that there is the potential of African thought systems currently in furthering knowledge in psychology instead of the predominant, Eurocentric thinkings. Then there's a question of what a psychology that centers on African experience look like. We want to see that kind of psychology. And also going beyond Eurocentrism into Afrocentrism. And also we want to find out whether to continue producing knowledge that focuses on uniqueness, to produce knowledge that looks at special cases and not going by the universalist outlook that the mainstream perspectives underscore. Then the issue of decolonization and de-imperialization, which is currently on. So, the challenges in tackling this, I'm about to. Maturity in language. Yes. The last concluding thoughts from the professor. We need a contribution. We need a contribution to the conversation of the modes of thinking that are Afrocentric committedly. We also need to reduce the head of thought by centering the African modes of thought as the starting point and tools for thinking about psychological phenomena. Finally, we need new forms of struggle in scientific research whose focus is on Afrocentrism, metacolonialism, context-specific indigenous knowledge, and sociocultural historical perspectives and explanations. So the professor thinks we should get deep and develop new discussions.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you, Joyce and Baluku for that good presentation, although you cheated our time, which is one of the major issues to consider. Please, may I draw your attention to our very good questions and comments from the participants? They are in the chat. So our presenters, please, we'll give first priority to answering those. If you can open and follow up. Now we are remaining with one presentation by Goretti, Madame Goretti Tumheirwe. Have you come? We can't afford to miss your presentation, which is on how to preserve this indigenous knowledge, how to archive it, which Charles raised, and we are longing for your presentation. Tumheirwe, what's Anybody with the idea of where she may be? Oh no, we are missing such a great presentation. Okay, without wasting much time, can we go to the participants? You can access Gorety's abstract. It's in this book. So let's go to the comments and contributions and questions from the participants. Let's start with Professor Daba. Do you identify any of the comments that you may wish to respond to?
I'm listening, Professor Godfrey.
Yes. The participants have posted some comments in the chat. You may wish to pick those that concern your topic.
I didn't check the comment or question.
Yes. As you check,
Would you forward it, please?
Maybe as you check, can Charles identify any that touch on his topic?
Yes, Prof. I have specific questions to my presentation. One is from Mark Olokotum. He says that how did you discover that Palabek Ogili site was to be an area of research interest? Yes, thank you, Mark. Yes, the interest in Palabek came in 2016 when I was part of a team that conducted the environmental and impact assessment for the development of Nimu River Multipurpose Project. As we were doing a study for that project, I saw a lot of potential of archaeological remains in the area. And that gave me a chance to go back personally in 2017 and 18 to go to Palabekal, where I talked to the communities, and they were able to point to me directly where important sites of archaeological importance were, including the stone wall structures. And that gave me a surprise because I was not getting them in the books, but the communities were aware of where these sites are. So that's where I picked interest in. Then the other question is from Dr. Charles, who says that, Charles, is there any relationship between the Palabek architecture and the archaeological assemblage? Yes, the stone walls actually relate to the archaeological remains on the ground. And basing on the tentative dating that we have so far done, shows that the two walls, Rome and the Pamois, date to about 17th century, but still there are archaeological remains that are older than that. So it needs further research or excavations to get a chronology of the site, especially since we are aware that it dates from the later Stone Age site. So more relationship will come as we do further dating. I think those were the two specific questions.
Yes, Charles, thank you very much. The other question is, for example, what criteria does an archaeologist use to pinpoint a site? I think that's the first question. How does an archaeologist pinpoint a site? What criteria does that one use? I think as an upcoming archaeologist, some would like to know that. Okay, then Robert, do you have any question? Daba is inquiring whether any of you would want to post any question to him. So, Robert?
Yes, Professor.
Yes. Have you identified any comments? The other members of the public can raise their hand and ask. Yeah.
Yes, I've identified. Question number 1 is from the host and the panelist, where they want to know what these dates are and how do we call them in the broad historical dating. In this capacity, I said that the Stone Age structure of sub-Saharan Africa, the Stone Age nomenclature is divided into 3, that is Early Stone Age, Middle Stone Age, and later Stone Age. And my period I'm looking at is the Sangoan period, which is basically by all nature a transition between the Achurian, which is the last part of the later Stone, the Early Stone Age, to the Middle Stone Age. That is where it is. But the nature or the questions or the controversies that lie around it is that what type of materials, or what is the typology of the materials that are there, in what environment was it, and basing on the element that these materials have a continuation from one cultural industry to the other. The question is, what is really the Sangoan? So in that capacity, if they look at the dates which I've got from the lab, the Sikaningo site is 194,000 plus or minus 9 years. And when you look at Simba, it's 320 plus or minus 3 years. Those are the tentative dates I have as of now. These dates are falling in the broad category. Different scholars all over the globe have looked at the Sangoan. Though at our home place, that is Sango Bay, where Wayland first worked on this and picked these materials as primitive tools, way back in the 1920s, no archaeological work has been done in that place, not until in 1916. So in 2016, when I went to the field for my master's, and I found that the materials he talked of on the surface were exactly, when I sent up a trench, they could be found underground. So when I found them in situ, this raised another level of thinking that I need to establish the date of this area. And by establishing the date of this area, what I thought of using was the OSL dating, because it can date the last time quartz material was exposed to light. But the Sangoan elsewhere has been dated between 400,000 to 200,000 years. So when you look at the plus or minus for Sikaningo, it too puts it at the lower limit of the Sangoan. And then
wind up
the dates of Simba, which is 320, put it almost at the upper limit, which becomes a spectacular date as far as Uganda and the East African context is concerned. We've had big dates in Kenya for the Caprithian Formation, which is 285,000 years. And now if I'm getting years which are older than that from the type site where the name originates, I think this is a great contribution of my study to the globe as far as the Sangoan culture is concerned. Thank you very much.
Indeed, Robert, that's a great contribution. Thank you very much. I'd like to have as many participants have a chat. So let's be concise when answering. Okay, any other question, by the way, for you? If not, let's see whether Joyce and Baruku, you have another one?
Yeah, there's one from Dr. Elizabeth.
From Dr. Elizabeth. I seem to have seen two.
Yeah, there is one from Dr. Elizabeth. What do we take away based on the results as the Sangoan? Based on the results, whether the Sangoan is a Achurian, a Middle Stone Age, or an independent industry. Dr. Tentatively, as I speak, the materials I'm getting, I'm analyzing them. I'm in the final stages of my analysis, but the lens in which I see this work going, I see an independent industry for the Sangoan culture coming from the type site Sango Bay, where the name originates from. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Daba, have you got any? Maybe if I can ask you a bit, did you read the minds of the people who are constructing those monuments? They are thinking about the time conjecture and what they meant in their lives at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Not just the tourists, but can we, in retrospectively read the mind and thinking of those people as represented by that monument?
Thank you, Professor Good, for a very interesting question. Yeah, the creator, those who create those monuments are mostly financed by, in our country, financed by officials. So what the sculpture represent what the political officials wanted to depict at the public. So for me, my study is descriptive. So I'm trying to describe what those monuments epitomizes in these three consecutive regimes in Ethiopia. When I say three consecutive regimes in modern Ethiopian history, from monarchical period to the incumbent, the current regime. So all politicians engage in a monumental controversy, at the same time conversation, to get public attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any comments for Joyce and Martin?
Okay. We have a comment, and it's about sharing more of our presentation with somebody in the audience, and so we are getting back to him.
Okay. So can the other participants raise a hand in case you have any question? Otherwise, I see very many appreciating. They are very excited, and we had about 30. Which shows that really this is a very, very good topic and area of study. We appreciate all of you. Any other with a burning question to raise? You can put up your hand. Wow, that's another compliment from Deo Kanamwanji. Yeah, I must say that archaeology is my greatest subject, and I feel like Simeon, when he saw Jesus in the chapel, that now I can rest in peace. Seeing the great minds exhuming African civilization to debunk the Eurocentric nonsense of diffusion as the cause of civilization in Africa. I don't know, Robert, can you compare those stone structures with, for example, the tourism around the pyramids? Can you read the mathematics that was in those engineers at that time? So all that liberates me as a development studies person. It liberates this notion that Africa was static, was backward, and civilization and development started with the coming of the whites, which is nonsense. So thank you for liberating us. I see great minds coming up in archaeology. There is one hand up. Is that Robert?
Yes, Professor.
Oh, okay, Robert, please. But you didn't answer the second question of Dr. Elizabeth.
I try to go to it, but I can expand slightly on that in the same line with what you've just said. Prof, on the question of Dr. Elizabeth, my response was that this work is still ongoing. I'm still doing analysis of the details, but I see the lane or the line in which this study is taking me. The Sangoan culture at Sango Bay might be an independent industry. And that is that as far as the other questions is concerned. Next, why I raised up the hand, I just want only to appreciate my funders, that is Geda Hankel, the College of Humanities, my supervisors, the research team I worked with, and I can see many of them on board. I'm really grateful for this great work.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Charles. Now it's time up, and would like to thank Mr. Michael Katende for taking us through very, very well. Thanks a lot. I'd like to thank all the participants. Thank you. Thank you for your interest in this very good topic in reclaiming African civilization and being very, very encouraging throughout the presentation. And most of all, I'd like to thank the participants who really are the shining light of our heritage. Thank you very much for keeping time. And if there is no other issue, we can close this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. The organizers, we are very grateful.
Thank you very much. We
To all
appreciate
participants.
your commitment.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you too.
I just